One man's death sparks chaos in Sri Lanka. The government imposes a nationwide state of emergency as Muslims and Buddhists go head-to-head. I'm Imran Garta, and today's newsmaker is Sri Lanka's religious violence. Almost a decade on from the end of a devastating civil war, violence has once again erupted in Sri Lanka. The government has imposed a state of emergency after violence broke out between Muslims and Buddhists. The clashes began with a car accident. It allegedly led to a group of Muslim men in one car killing the Buddhist driver in the other. The retribution has been swift. Riots and arson attacks have targeted Muslim shops and mosques across the country. And in addition to round-the-clock curfews in some areas, federal troops have been deployed, schools have shut, and social media has been blocked. The government says it's all to prevent further violence. But critics say the response is political. Basil Rehan explains.
These Buddhist protesters have gathered outside a police station in central Sri Lanka. They're demanding the release of detainees arrested for torching properties owned by Muslims. Authorities say Buddhist mobs are responsible for damaging dozens of homes and shops, as well as 4 mosques across central Sri Lanka. In one burnt-out building, authorities recovered the body of a young Muslim man. That has heightened fears of more retaliation. Police have tried using curfews to stop the violence, but with little success. On Tuesday, Sri Lanka's president took a step further and declared a nationwide state of emergency.
Not only do I condemn the violence, I've also instructed the police to take maximum action against individuals, organizations, and groups involved in those violent acts.
Sri Lanka hasn't seen a state of emergency in 7 years, and soldiers are being deployed across the island for at least 10 days. The latest violence began a week ago, following the death of this Buddhist man in the inland city of Kandy. He was allegedly attacked by Muslims. 70% of Sri Lanka's 21 million people are Buddhists. Muslims make up just 9%. Tension between Sinhalese Buddhists and Muslims has risen since 2012. Many say it's fueled by hardline Buddhist groups. Members of the Muslim community say they are living in fear. For 26 years, Sri Lanka was embroiled in a civil war between government forces and the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam. The LTTE was fighting for an independent Tamil homeland, and it nearly tore the nation apart. Throughout that conflict, Sri Lanka was under a state of emergency. And now, its reappearance has alarmed many who fear a return to ethnic strife. Last month, the newsmakers reported on Sri Lanka's post-war efforts at reforms aimed at being more inclusive to minorities. The Sri Lankan government made an ambitious set of promises at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva in 2015. It's recorded as Resolution 30-1. It would set up 4 pillars of transitional justice: truth, justice, reparations, and guarantees of non-recurrence. A key component would include establishing a judicial mechanism to investigate allegations of violations and abuses of human rights and violations of international humanitarian law. In 2017, Sri Lanka asked the Council for more time to deliver on those promises, and its people are still waiting. But with the new wave of ethnic strife sweeping Sri Lanka, these reforms seem increasingly urgent. So, how committed is Sri Lanka's government to reform? And would this be the key to lasting calm? Basil Rehan, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Ankara is Sri Lanka's ambassador to Turkey, Pakir Mohyeddin Amza. Sir, it's a pleasure having you on The Newsmakers. Thank you very much for taking the time. Tell me why you think it's necessary for your country to have a state of emergency.
It is important because we have seen the unprecedented violence in our country, and to curb this violence, you need some extra power to our armed forces. We have taken a careful decision after going through every options. We had a decision yesterday in the cabinet, followed by the meeting of the Security Council. There we have decided to have the emergency for a limited period of 7 days, and during which we thought we should be able to bring this violence into control.
Sir, is incitement happening against the Muslim community?
I just want to, first of all, extend or reiterate our sincere sympathies and condolences to the two most valuable lives that we have lost for last 1 week, one from the Sinhala community and another from the Muslim community. And we also condemn the attack on the properties and the mosque, and we are doing everything possible to bring this into control. We don't support it. It's a difficult task. We are trying our best to control them.
Yes, and as we all know, this was all triggered by an isolated incident. Many would almost term it as road rage, but it has spiraled out of control. The New York Times, in their piece, says that President Sirisana's fragile coalition government has been accused of emboldening extremists by failing to hold groups that incite hatred to account. Is that a fair and accurate representation of what's going on in your country, sir?
Hatred is something that we don't like. In fact, we all taking every possible action to curb this. Under the emergency regulations, hatred speech also prohibited. We are taking some actions to control it, and I'm sure that we will be able to succeed it.
And how important is it to you, symbolically especially, that celebrities, especially former cricketers like Sangakkara and Jayawardene and so forth, have come out on Twitter and have been tweeting for unity and for people not to take the law into their own hands and calling for ethnic unity in your country?
It's a very, very, very welcome move, because these are the celebrities that we consider them as treasures, and it is very good of them to come at this moment and tell our people. Because I also must flag it at this point of time, Imran, that this is not the incident that is involving the majority of Sri Lankans, because majority of the Sri Lankan people, both in all communities, the Sinhalese, the Tamils and the Muslims, are peace-living people. We have been living there for centuries together. And this is only a minority people, and I'm sure that the appeal by the celebrities will go in a long way. And this is a wish of all the Sri Lankans in our country.
Ambassador Pakir Mohideen Amza, I thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Let's bring in our panel now, and joining us from Colombo is Dilante Withanage. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Sinhalese Buddhist Nationalist Organization, Bodubala Sena. Also in Colombo is businessman Muhammad Hisham. He's the former director of the Halal Accreditation Council of Sri Lanka. And we have human rights activist Ruki Fernando, who joins us from the city of Kandy, where the violence first erupted. Gentlemen, I thank you very much for joining us. Ruki, let me begin with you. We just spoke to Sri Lanka's ambassador to Turkey. He says we should remember that even though there's a state of emergency for a short period of time, these incidents don't reflect broadly what's going on in Sri Lanka, and these incidents are isolated. Is that fair?
It's certainly not isolated here in Kandy, and if the road that I came through today, I saw plenty of burnt bicycles, motorbikes, shops. There were shops that were on fire today around Kandy, and till today, even including the place where I'm staying, people are staying in fear. We don't know what will happen tonight. Any mob could break in, and we don't have the assurance that the government, the police or the army can protect us.
Who is behind the trouble, Ruki?
Well, clearly this seems to be incited by groups that are led by Buddhist monks and thugs. And clearly people have been telling us around Kandy that the police and the special task force has been watching by when this violence was happening. So clearly the government has not been able to control it and to take decisive action. And some of the hate speech is very visible, who's responsible on social media. And no action has been taken against them, although the government seems to be trying to clamp down general on freedom of expression and communication by clamping down on social media platforms like WhatsApp, Facebook, etc.
Okay, so Dilante, we hear Ruki saying that Buddhist monks and what he calls thugs are both inciting and attacking Muslims?
First of all, I would like to say that we are very unfortunate to see this situation in Sri Lanka. I don't think that whatever the NGOs promoting internationally is not correct. 22nd February, lorry driver, a Sinhalese Buddhist, attacked by 4 Muslim three-wheel drivers, and that person got killed by them, and 3rd March night, he died. As a result of that, certain elements, I don't say that Buddhist monks did it or thugs did it, but some elements. Maybe Buddhist monks were worried about the situation in Sri Lanka, but the way how they interpret is completely wrong. I blame, because from 2013, I know about this situation in Sri Lanka. People are fear about Muslim extremism because it's a global phenomena, not only from Sri Lanka. But most of Sri Lankan Muslims are innocent people. But unfortunately, US and other governments, UN, funded a large number of NGOs and other organizations in Sri Lanka to build reconciliation, coexistence. But we are worried, what happened to this money?
Okay, so let me ask you, Tilante, because you're talking about very big things about the fear of Muslim extremism. Let me ask you about 27-year-old Abdul Basit, who was basically lynched, burned to death in his own house. When the police were nearby, I guess he and his family expected that this would never happen. I want to ask you very clearly, do you in any way associate him with what you call the Muslim fear?
No, I don't think. He is very innocent people. I told you, in Sri Lanka, more than 99% Muslims are innocent people. We are shocked to see these situations. But unfortunately, what we are blaming that not only government, NGOs who got millions of dollars from the US and other government and other agencies failed to establish reconciliation in this country. Because due to war, due to other reasons, Sri Lanka is a violent country. Although it's a democratic country. So this violence should be addressed properly. It's not violence from all parties. So it is unfair to only blame Buddhist monks.
Okay. So let me ask Muhammad Hisham. Okay, fair enough. So Muhammad Hisham, is it a good point that it is unfair to only blame Buddhist monks when we look at the root causes, or maybe not the root causes, but the trigger of this latest round of violence was the fact that Muslims allegedly killed a Buddhist?
I think, Imran, you are very correct. That question is very to the point, because Mr. Vitanage mentioned how it started, but I think what he probably knowingly or unknowingly missed out was that what happened was it was not an issue between Muslims and Buddhists. It was 3 drunkard three-wheel drivers who happened to be Muslims. They ended up having a fight on the street with a lorry driver, and the guy was, and the lorry driver passed away on the 3rd, that was Saturday morning. And until Sunday night, there was no issue. The local temple Buddhist monks, like Ruki said, most of the local community were not violent at all at that time. And local Buddhist monks, Muslim community leaders, and the police, everybody got together, and peace and calmness was maintained. But what happened was Mr. Vitanage's organizational head, Jnana Saratero, and then 3 other very notorious anti-Muslim extremists, they apparently coincidentally happened to go to this funeral out of nowhere on Sunday night, and that ended up in a whole set of violence where the police arrested 24 people, and these guys demanded that day to be released.
Okay, you made a claim there and an accusation. So, Mr. Vitanage, has your organization, along with others, added fuel to the fire?
So this is how these people interpret it. Now it's on social media available, the way how our leader went to this particular funeral house, and everything is there. Nothing happened like that. It was very clear. It's openly done. And actually, now he is the leader in this country who is promoting, if you can see the radio, television station and all, during this couple of days, he was addressing the media and bringing peace into this country.
Ruki, if I had to ask you, Ruki, let me bring you in here. If I had to ask you, what are the root causes of the trouble that we're seeing right now in Sri Lanka? What would you say is the root cause?
Well, there's been a very strong dominance of the Sinhalese Buddhist community in Sri Lanka. Most of the political leadership has been Sinhalese Buddhist. I think Kandy is a very good example. Kandy is considered a very sacred city for Buddhists in particular. It's a historical city. This is where we have one of the most sacred and important Buddhist shrines, the Dalada Maligawa. This is where two of the most top prelates reside, the Mahanayaka Theros, the chief prelates. So, but if they can't control a section of the Buddhist population, if the Buddhist values doesn't prevail and stop them from attacking communities who are minorities, that fundamentally is a root cause. So right. the form of Sinhalese Buddhism that we have is a fundamental root cause of this problem.
Okay, so
and the inability of government control.
Right. Okay, so Dilantha Witanaga, it's not just rookies saying this. Hold on for a second. Let me just add something to it, right? We have the International Crisis Group, Alan Keenan, Sri Lanka expert from the International Crisis Group, saying the renewed violence in past months could be related to the growing strength of Rajapaksa's opposition movement. Many say the intercommunal violence is a product of the search for a new enemy to replace the Tamils, unite the Sinhala, and win votes by cultivating a sense of Sinhala Buddhists under siege. That sounds quite scathing. I don't think the International Crisis Group, Dilanthe, has a dog in this fight. I don't think they want to be biased. Tell me what's going on, Dilanthe.
No, I don't think you can't blame for this the Buddhists. As many say, many understand that it's a very peaceful country. And these incidents happen and we should stop this. There is no argument about it. And we are fighting to stop this. Even when the Alugama incident took place, we took all measures in order to not spread. Even today, the Venerable Jnanasara Thero, he was supposed to fly to Japan, but he stopped that flight and he's staying in Sri Lanka and made number of statements in order to reduce this violence. Now, what I'm trying to say that you can't blame Buddhism or Buddhist monks for this. Now, for example, what is happening in Middle East, can you blame Islam for this?
But that was not suggested by either Ruki or the International Crisis Group, nor myself in the question. What we're saying is Sri Lanka, at the moment, according to these experts, seems to be a country that promotes the Sinhala at the expense of minorities. Nobody's blamed Buddhism for anything. So, again, are they making it up, or do they have
Buddhist monks? Because when you say Buddhist monks behind this, it's completely wrong. If you look at maybe 2 or 3 Buddhist monks can do that.
Okay, Ruki, you want to respond to that?
Not a large number of Buddhist monks are against this.
So, but then why is it that the other Buddhist monks and the other Buddhist people are not coming forward to stand against it? Now, Kandy has been burning, the surrounding areas have been burning, Muslims have been fleeing their homes and they're not able to stay in their homes. So why isn't the large
you should check the today's media, how many Buddhist monks spoke openly and regret about these situations and condemn this situation and ask people to be live peacefully.
Okay,
I think there are
so Ruki feels it's not enough. Okay, hold on. Ruki feels it's not enough. Dilanthe is saying they are doing it, but Dilanthe, just for the record, nobody is accusing Buddhism of anything on this program. Make that fundamentally clear. During the show. Mohammed, I want you to have a listen to the President, President Sirisena. Have a little listen to what the President had to say.
I condemn all the violent incidents that have taken place. Not only do I condemn the violence, I've also instructed the police to take maximum action against individuals, organizations, and/or groups involved in those violent acts.
So, Mohammed Hisham, isn't that strong leadership? Isn't that acceptable to you? He's condemned the violence, he's condemned the incitement, and they want to grab a hold of this.
I think the president's condemnation is correct. And what people are asking on the ground is now the law enforcement authorities to do the right thing, because there has been skirmishes and others where mobs have been roaming around freely in isolated locations, pockets of Muslim areas, despite the curfew for the last couple of days. So that is what people are asking. President is correct in condemning. I think the law enforcement has to follow up that and make sure the law is implemented. And Imran, just give me a moment on what Dilanthe, I think I agree with Dilanthe on one point. Majority of the Buddhist monks have been condemning this, and it's not reflective of the Buddhists for sure. But at the same time, people like who are affiliated to Dilanta's organization, I may not necessarily mention, but Ampiti, Sumana, to all the other people, Theros, they are the ones who have instigated the whole thing. And because this violence did not start from local people, local community was peaceful, local monks were peaceful. It started from busloads of people coming from Batikalo to Gaul to Mathare, going there and mobilizing and then creating mobs, and that's how the bloodshed started. This is exactly how Aludgama violence happened several years ago. And I think that also, although the BBS has been denying, I'm not pointing the finger only at BBS here, because there are enough and more evidences as to who instigated, because the local community was calm for 40 hours. The last 8 or 12 hours before the funeral was taken, these outsiders went and capitalized on this. Because partly the president did condemn the issues, Imran, but partly we had to also point a finger at the government at some point, because they have not been strict enough about hate speech and spreading of hatred under the guise of nationalism, as some of these groups claim to be. And I think they were soft pedaling with it. And now it has come to a point, it's a shame on the whole country and a majority of peace-loving Buddhists, Muslims, Tamils, and everybody.
Dilante?
Yes, I believe that we can debate about this and we can find faults with others. But what is important today is to get this emergency lift as soon as possible and to bring it to normalcy. And I believe we have to change our approaches, the government approaches and NGO approaches, and we have to have new approaches to build trust between Sinhalese, Buddhist and Tamils and all people and build this nation again. I think that is what we should focus
that trust
today.
will not be built when your allies go on asking about trying to marginalize and claiming Sri Lanka to be a Sinhala Buddhist country. It's I think we have to cherish the diversity. It's a country for everybody.
No, because we have to understand that it was a Sinhala Buddhist country, because now if you say that some Pakistan or Bangladesh is an Islamic country, but there are Buddhists living.
No,
so
let us talk about Sri Lanka. Sri Lankan constitution does not say it is a Sinhala Buddhist country. It's a Buddhist majority country where every other community has equal rights.
Now, look at, you have 10% population. You have more than 9,000 mosques in your country, but in number of temples. Now, every freedom is there for Muslims and all other people. But Sri Lanka was traditionally a Sinhala Buddhist country. So why don't accept that?
No, I don't agree with that. I say it's a Sinhala Buddhist majority country where every community, every religion has equal rights. That's what our constitution says, Dilante. You can have your own interpretation. I think this is where you have created this sense of fear-mongering among the communities, where you have said that Muslims and the Tamils are taking over the country and the mobs have been mobilized. I think that's what we have to stop responsibly.
I don't think Tamils or Muslims can take over this country. I don't think that. And Sinhala, we were saying
I'm happy that you are saying that, yeah.
Priority is given to Sinhalese Buddhists, not by what you call Sinhalese, but it's given by the British. And it is given by the British people.
The constitution, you and me are following as the Sri Lankan constitution very clearly says.
I want to take a moment here. I want to jump in here because, okay, this is interesting. Listen, I want to get you both back on the program again to debate whether that constitution needs to change and the very fundamentals of what it means to be Sri Lankan. For the moment, we're out of time. I want to give Ruki 20 seconds, Ruki. If you had to advise the leadership to do anything right now, what would you advise them to do?
We should arrest all the perpetrators who are clearly implicated by video evidence and eyewitness accounts, not only in relation to the incidents in Kandy and Ampara in the last few weeks, but also many, many years, including the leader of the Dilanta's organization, who was in courts today. He has summoned by courts to answer court charges against threats he had made against a lady whose husband had disappeared. So unless and until the government takes decisive action to hold those accountable and to step in decisively when mobs are rampaging the streets, we can't build reconciliation. Minorities won't feel safe.
Okay, Ruki Fernando, Dilante Witanage and Mohammed Hisham, I thank you all for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Still ahead on the Newsmakers, a shootout in Kashmir sparks mass protests. Is a new wave of violence brewing? And did Russia poison a former spy? The UK is threatening retaliation against Moscow. We ask a former British agent what she thinks. A new wave of violence in Kashmir started when a car refused to stop at a checkpoint on Sunday night. A shootout ensued and Indian soldiers killed 4 civilians and 2 suspected militants. The incident has sparked dozens of protests across the disputed region, and authorities have the area on lockdown. But is it enough to quash dissent? Tensions are already high as separatist leaders have called for a strike, angry over India's plans to transfer rebel prisoners to jails outside the region. With more on this, here's Adil Halim.
They promised payback and seem to have delivered. Indian security forces have killed the man they believe was the mastermind behind last month's attack on an army base in Sunjwan that left 6 soldiers dead.
He was eliminated. He was the mastermind behind several attacks on the security forces, and one of the most important out of them was the Sunjwan attack.
India accuses Pakistan of arming and training the Jaish-e-Mohammed militants who carried out that raid, a charge Islamabad denies. But during this latest retaliation by Indian forces, 4 civilians were also killed. Those deaths sparked protests against India across Indian-administered Kashmir. The Indian army says rebels fired at a checkpoint from a moving car and triggered a shootout. But locals are disputing the Indian army's version of events, saying the 4 civilians were killed in cold blood. Many of the 12 million people in Indian-administered Kashmir already loathe India's troop presence there, and what they say is a heavy-handed response to unrest.
The incident is intended to instill fear among the Kashmiri people. This is a murder of innocent people. The parties who contest elections are responsible for these killings.
On Monday, authorities put large areas under curfew, closed schools, and suspended access to the internet. The region's pro-India parties, the National Conference, and the ruling People's Democratic Party have called for an investigation into the deaths. But rights groups aren't expecting one. They say past investigations have turned up nothing as Indian soldiers avoid prosecution by invoking a controversial emergency law, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Under the AFSPA, Indian soldiers cannot be tried in civilian courts for killings in Kashmir unless New Delhi says otherwise. To date, it hasn't done so. Kashmir has been the focal point of 2 of the 3 wars between nuclear-armed neighbors, Pakistan and India, since partition in 1947. Both countries claim the Muslim-majority region in full, but rule only in part. Since the 1990s, nearly 70,000 people have been killed in uprisings against Indian rule and in subsequent military crackdowns. With the seeming lack of accountability in one of the world's most militarized zones, Kashmiris are demanding the largest democracy bring the accused soldiers to justice. And many are wondering if this latest unrest will provoke further waves of retribution. Adil Halim, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Srinagar is Kashmiri separatist leader Mirwais Umar Farooq. He's the chairman of the All Parties Hurriyat Conference. In New Delhi, we have Ashok Kumar Mehta. He's a former Major General in the Indian Army. And also in New Delhi is Muhammad Junaid. He's the founder of the Kashmir Solidarity Network, a think tank focusing on a united and independent Kashmir. Gentlemen, I thank you very much for joining us here on The Newsmakers. Mirwais Umar Farooq, let me begin with you. First of all, for the sake of our viewers, explain why you're under house arrest and also tell us who you blame for the current troubles.
Well, to be honest enough, I don't even know why I'm under house arrest because I have not been served any order by the government. They just come and block my gate with an army truck and a police truck, and even nobody tells me that, I am under house arrest. I'm just not allowed to move outside. And that is not the case only with me, with my other colleagues, which is Gilani Saab. He's been under the same situation for the past 6 years now. My other colleague, Yasin Malik, is off and on in central jail. And same is the case with all our Hurriyat activists and colleagues. It's virtually, Kashmir has been virtually turned into a police state, a military state, where all your political, social, even religious rights are being usurped. I mean, I'm also a Mirwais. I give the sermon at the Grand Mosque of Jamia Masjid, which is been under lockdown continuously in the last year, it was under lockdown for 17 Fridays, and nobody was allowed to assemble in the mosque. So, this is the state of affairs as far as Jammu and Kashmir is concerned.
Okay, so Major General Mehta, is that accurate? Kashmir is currently a police state under lockdown.
Well, absolutely not correct. Yes, Kashmir, we have a problem running for the last 70 years in Kashmir. That problem is largely created from across the border by sending in terrorists and by also creating a group of people within Jammu and Kashmir by the Pakistani military establishment and its intelligence wing, the ISI, a combination of the infiltration and terrorists and certain gentlemen, the Hurriyat, whom Mirwais Saab just referred to, are people responsible for instigating the kind of violence that is taking place within Jammu and Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir, if were it to be left to itself, I'm sure that the problem can be resolved politically. But since Pakistan is directly involved in fomenting and instigating trouble and also encouraging people like Mirwais, not so much, but Syed Shah Gilani and his cohorts, we have this current situation where his description that it's a military state might well be true. That the state of affairs in Jammu and Kashmir, where the military has been deployed for the last 70 years, I mean, this is nothing new.
Okay.
And this situation has been going on off and on.
Okay, fair point.
For the
fair point. I just want to respond.
Years.
I want to respond. Mohammed, I'm going to bring you in just a minute, so bear with me. I need to get a response from Mirwais Omar Farooq. So, a few claims there. Pakistan is instigating the issue here. Militants from the likes of Lashkar-e-Toiba are making life difficult for ordinary Kashmiris, and that's why they have to be under lockdown. So the problem comes from outside, it comes from Pakistan, and it comes from people such as yourself, according to the Major General, who are instigating the trouble. Give me a response to that, sir.
See, unfortunately, this is a mindset all the people in New Delhi have, that everything which is happening in Kashmir is sponsored and it is aided and abetted by Pakistan, and Pakistan is doing this and Pakistan is doing that. The fact of the matter is that for the past so many years now, 30 years since 1990, we saw a resurgence in Kashmiri freedom struggle. And we have seen Kashmiri boys, I mean, even today while we are talking, we are observing, today was a hartal, a shutdown, and we had given a call to go to Shopian to pay tributes to 6 people who died there, and 4 of them were civilians who were killed in cold blood. They were not Pakistanis, they were all Kashmiris, Kashmiri young boys. I mean, in the past 8 weeks, 13 civilians have been gunned down. I'm not talking about militants. I'm not talking about Lashkar-e-Toiba and other, militants who have died. I'm just talking about civilians. 13 civilians have been killed. 6 of them are from Shopian, one district of South Kashmir, and they are blaming us. I mean, how are we to blame? I am confined to my house. So are my other colleagues. So this discourse that everything is aided and abetted by Pakistan, this is an easy way out for New Delhi.
Okay.
Blame Pakistan. Blame others, while the gentleman is saying that the army is here for the last so many years. That is exactly the fate which we are witnessing every day. Every day, unless and until the black laws under which the Indian Parliament has given them this right, Armed Forces Special Powers Act, you cannot prosecute any soldier. You cannot take them to a court of law because they're protected by these special powers. So this. When I say military state, because we are saying military state because That is what is ruling Kashmir. I mean, even I'm sure you might have heard about what's happening with the court of law here. Even the Supreme Court has now come in, and they are saying they have stopped this investigation into this one particular incident where a particular this major was accused of killing and opening fire on civilians in Shopian.
Okay, Mohammed Junaid, let me ask you about terminology. We have Indian Army spokesman Colonel Rajesh Kalia referring to the civilians who were killed as overground workers, which is a term, as far as I understand, which is created by Indian security forces to refer to those who might not be active rebels, but who give support to militants. How do you feel about that? Is that accurate? Is that fair?
Well, first of all, I'm an anthropologist. I study the effects of everyday militarization on Kashmiri lives. And I have first-hand accounts of how it is to live in a space which is heavily militarized, where there's an overbearing presence of military who have extraordinary powers to kill, arrest, confiscate property, or injure people. There's a long history of the Indian government using certain terminology to criminalize dissent in Kashmir. Previously, when the Indian forces would kill Kashmiris, they would call them agitational terrorists. And now there's a new counterinsurgency term, overground workers. The point of all of this is that there has been a shift, a larger shift within Indian discourse, especially since the election of Mr. Modi as the Prime Minister of India. India now believes that the primary solution to Kashmir is a militaristic one, a military one, under which it has deadly consequences because they treat any Kashmiri who is protesting this overbearing presence of military and their powers as armed combatants whose lives do not matter. So, and there have been a flurry of statements coming from the top echelons of Indian politics, which basically tell the military forces that they have a free hand to deal with, to see fit what they want to do with the protests that are going on. Of course, when you're encouraging military to be impunious, and there's no oversight, and there is no institutional oversight. The judiciary has been, the highest courts in India are basically refusing any probes, any judicious investigation into these human rights abuses. The military feels they can do whatever they want.
Okay, so let's get a response from Ashok Mehta. Ashok Mehta, you're old enough to recognize if there has been a shift. The claim from Mohammed is that there's been a major shift to a more hawkish, militarized approach to resolving Kashmir, just smash them up and crush all dissent. That's the claim. Is it true?
That is absolutely absurd. We know that no military, whether it is Afghanistan or Vietnam, no military can neutralize an insurgency which is sponsored from outside the country by Pakistan and which is abetted by people from inside, can ever be solved militarily. What the military is doing, and for the last so many years, is trying to create conditions whereby there can be a political settlement to this problem that has been festering for the last 70 years. As far as the Armed Forces Special Powers Act is concerned, that is a legal cover for people who are involved in You see, this is not a law and order problem. This is a regular proxy war going on in Jammu and Kashmir. And this proxy war is being launched by Pakistan.
Okay, so let me ask you very directly, sir.
Terrorists.
Okay, so can I ask you very directly, if you don't mind me interrupting, let me ask you very directly. You have Mirwais Umar Farooq, who's talking with you directly in this conversation. Do you believe that he's an agent of Pakistan? Because you're calling it a proxy war. He's saying he's a Kashmiri nationalist. You're saying Pakistan is behind him. No, so are you saying he's an agent of Pakistan?
Everybody is a Kashmiri. People who live in Kashmir are Kashmiris. But there are people who are, he may not be one. The Mirwais himself may not be one. He is one of the Sena. Excuse me. He is one of the Sena voices that comes out from the valley. But a majority of the people who are there are connected and and are directly linked in terms of monetary support, in terms of aiding and abetting, and getting these people out on the streets to pelt stones at the army convoys. These so-called overground workers are really are terrorists who are unarmed.
But
people
you're calling them terrorists who are unarmed. We're seeing little kids getting pellets in their faces, right? I mean,
well, these people who you call kids should be in school and not pelting stones.
Okay.
Why on earth are they there pelting stones at the army
perhaps
convoy?
Because their condition is unbearable. Mirwais Omar Farooq, a response from you, sir.
Well, you know, it's unfortunate. I mean, I understand that Mr. Mehta is from the army, so he'll have to defend the army. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, people of Kashmir have been trying to convey to the Indian leadership for a long time. And it's not only me, my other colleagues as well. We tried our level best to engage with the government of India, to try and talk sense to them that you have to engage with the problem politically. It's not a military problem. It's not a law and order problem. It's not a problem of daily issues like what we call Sadak Bijli Pani, you know, I mean, roads or infrastructure or education. Yes, these are important issues. But the people of Kashmir are demanding a final settlement. And when you talk about final settlement, that is where Pakistan comes in. I mean, Pakistan is a party to the problem because, you know, even by the UN resolutions, even by the Shimla Agreement, they are a party. They hold on to a territory of Kashmir, which is still a part of the disputed state of Jammu and Kashmir. Pakistan has never claimed that Kashmir belongs to Pakistan or is a province of Pakistan as opposed to India. So I think there are still questions which are valid and legal questions about the final dispensation of the Kashmir dispute. And that is what we say. The Hurriyat and the leadership here is very clearly saying that you need to engage. India, Pakistan, and the leadership of Jammu and Kashmir have to sit across the table and try to resolve the problem. And because India is not resolving the problem politically, and they are pushing a military agenda.
Can I ask Mirwais one question?
Go ahead.
Can I ask the Mirwais one question? While I agree 100% what he is saying, is there any denial of the fact that if the Pakistanis stop infiltration in 2003, when General Musharraf was the army chief, the infiltration had come down considerably. In 2003 to 2007, we had one of the most fruitful dialogues, peaceful dialogues, leading to an interim.
There's a question in there. We are running out of time, sir.
Of Jammu and Kashmir.
We got the question. Okay, Mirwais, briefly, please, sir.
See. Yes. You have to understand the fact that, you know, it's not that, you know, as far as militancy is concerned. Yes, militancy is one aspect of the problem. But right now, you know, if you look at militancy in Kashmir, what is prompting, you know, they're talking about Pakistan. Right now, you have Kashmiri boys, educated young boys who are leaving schools, who are colleges, universities, and going towards violence. Who is pushing them towards that? You know, the constituency for dialogue and reconciliation has shrunk. Because the government of India has always, I mean, the journalists talked about the lean period. What measures did the government of India take to address the Kashmir in that lean period?
Point well made.
The youth of Kashmir are saying that, you know.
Certainly, point well made. We are running out of time. I want to give Mohammed Junaid, I know I've been really unfair on you, Mohammed Junaid, and I apologize. I want to give you the final word here. Looking forward, we saw massive protests after Burhan Wani was killed in the summer of 2016. We're seeing protests erupt now. Is it going to be as bad as that, or maybe even worse this time around?
Well, I hope it's not as bad as it was in 2016. Close to 100 people died. There were like hundreds of people who were blinded. 15,000 people were injured. This is like a lot of cost that Kashmir is a small country, small nation. We have borne a lot of cost for this conflict. I think going forward, what the Indian government needs to really do is to reflect deeply upon what it has been doing over the last at least 27 years. There is a political constituency, a huge political constituency. Nobody wants to send their children to die. Everybody wants to go to school. You know, we have political leaders like Mirwais. He has mentioned other people there as well. The government of India should open dialogue with people, a fair dialogue, and not imprison them, not house arrest them. If Kashmiri people feel a sense that, you know, Indian government is sincere in, you know, opening a dialogue, I don't think that anyone is going to jump, you know, towards militancy.
Okay, gentlemen. I sincerely thank you all for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Unfortunately, I've got to move on. Mohammed Junaid, Ashok Kumar Mehta and Mirwais Umar Farooq, thanks again.
While it would be wrong to prejudge the investigation, I can reassure the House that should evidence emerge that implies state responsibility, then Her Majesty's government will respond appropriately and robustly.
Strong words from the UK's Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson. At issue is the alleged poisoning of a former Russian spy on British soil. Johnson warned that if the Kremlin is behind the attack, there will be repercussions. Russia's foreign ministry took offense, saying the allegations are designed to complicate relations between London and Moscow. But many say the case echoes the fate of former Russian spy Alexander Litvinenko, who was poisoned to death in London about 10 years ago. So let's go over now what we know now with former spy and whistleblower Annie Machon. She was an intelligence agent with the UK's security service MI5 until she quit the agency in 1996. Annie, thank you very much for joining us. So Sergei Skripal and his daughter, were they poisoned by the Kremlin?
I think there are many, many questions still. There are many known unknowns. It appears that some substance was applied to them. We don't know if it's poison. And until we can find out exactly what the substance was, we have no way of even beginning to investigate who might have perpetrated this, if it indeed is an attack. So I think for our Foreign Secretary to immediately say, you know, there are going to be repercussions for the Kremlin is jumping not one, but about 600 guns.
Yeah.
And I think it's rather reckless in this very delicate diplomatic era between the West and Russia for a Foreign Secretary to do that. Now, I could speculate he's doing this partly because he is actually the political master of the Foreign Intelligence Gathering Agency in the UK, MI6. And Skripal was indeed an MI6 agent, recruited by MI6 in the mid-1990s, caught out for his spying, his espionage in Russia, put on trial, convicted and sent to prison in the mid-noughties. And only in 2010 was he pardoned by Russia and released as part of a spy swap with the Russian illegal sleeper cell over in the United States. Since then, he's been living in the UK, where MI6 would have pinched him off and had a duty of care for him. So
right.
the political master, the Foreign Secretary of MI6,
doesn't that give Russia motive?
Should indeed be.
If he was still working for MI5 or MI6 or whatever, wouldn't it give Russia motive? Because then we can say, well, isn't it similar to perhaps what they did to Alexander Litvinenko?
I think there's a very clear distinction between Litvinenko and this case. Litvinenko was he was a whistleblower. He had fled to Russia and sought sanctuary in the UK. And he, at the time of his death, was working as a consultant for MI6. However, what we're looking at in the current case is someone who had been arrested, been convicted, been pardoned by Russia and been freed by Russia and pensioned off. So he was not an active agent at the time of his death, as far as we know, or there's a high probability. Plus, people who are swapped in spy deals tend not to be assassinated by the country which swapped them. I mean, I can't think of any other case in history where that's happened. So there are two very different cases. And I think, you know, it's natural to think, oh, there must be two poisoning cases. It must be the same as Litvinenko. But until we have the evidence, all we can do is speculate. And at the moment, I find that speculation very dangerous.
But Annie, who else would have wanted to kill him?
Who knows? I mean, this is what a police investigation will be looking into. What we do not know is what he's been doing for work since he moved to the UK. He's been there for, I think, 8 years, almost 8 years. So perhaps he was involved in other slightly nefarious schemes. Perhaps he was working for organisations that might have had competitors who are slightly ruthless. We just don't know. This is what the police will have to look into. But I think automatically assuming because 20 years ago he was recruited to work for MI6, almost 10 years ago he was pardoned and released and pensioned off, Thereby, it still makes it a spy case. I'm not so sure. It makes it a very sexy story for the media, but I'm not sure if that's actually where the evidence is going to take us in this case.
What amount of evidence would prove to you that Russia did it?
Well, that's an interesting semantic question as well. I mean, when we say Russia, what do we mean? Do we mean the Kremlin? Do we mean Moscow? Do we mean Putin himself? There's a conflation of these terms that is bandied around by the Western media particularly that cause problems in diplomatic relations between countries. It might well turn out it's something to do with some sort of Russian mafia thing. It might be another country's intelligence agency, for all we know. Or it might actually just be a genuine case of an accident and accidental poisoning. We just don't know at this point. This is why speculation is so dangerous, particularly when we get the Western media sort of herd instinct. As soon as they hear the word Russian spy, oh, it must be Russia. And it's a very febrile environment at the moment because of Russiagate in America, where all fingers automatically point at Russia. It may well be that they were behind it, but to say that with total lack of evidence at this point, I think is very damaging diplomatically and potentially for peace.
Okay, so let me then just sort of rewind a little bit. And the reason I asked you that is because over time, there seemed to be incontrovertible evidence that Alexander Litvinenko was poisoned by the Kremlin. So would you accept that he was poisoned by the Kremlin, that met the evidence threshold?
There seems to be a lot of evidence pointing in that direction. However, again, we get sort of over-enthusiastic Western media saying, oh, well, if it came from the Kremlin or if it came from one of the spy agencies, Putin must have personally ordered it. Again, we have no proof of that. What I would say as well is there does seem to be a demonization of Russia going on at the moment. I mean, okay, all our countries do this sort of thing.
Okay, but I'm asking a few questions. Certainly. I'm not the Western media. I'm not demonizing Russia. I'm asking basic questions. Was the man poisoned, and was it similar to Litvinenko?
Basically, we don't know if he was poisoned. The evidence indicates he might have been, but we're still waiting for the toxicology reports. We have to find out what it was, how it could have been administered, and then investigate who might have been in contact with him and his daughter that night. And then, you know, from there, work through his current life, work through his current contacts, and build together an evidential case about who might have been, who might have caused this. At this point, we just don't know. It's speculation. Okay. The temptation tends to be, though, to blame Russia.
Okay. Annie Machon, thank you very much for joining us. And that's all for this edition of The Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. You can check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe. Next time, North Korea says it's willing to end its nuclear program. Is this a massive breakthrough or a bluff? Until then, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.